Okay, in this tutorial, we're going to use Adobe After Effects to animate still images. We're going to take a scene from Photoshop with the layers, taking the Adobe After Effects, animate the objects or the layers, and animate the camera into the space, to this three-dimensional space. Okay, I have in this folder prepared a Photoshop file with a background image, some objects in there, some of the Universal Studio monsters in there, since we're close to Halloween. I have some background, foreground images, all kinds of images, smoke, PNGs, translucent smoke. These monsters I cut out with a pen tool in Adobe Photoshop. Now I sort of just threw these things on here, and we can rearrange these in After Effects, as you will see. So I prepared this, maintained the layers in one Photoshop file. You could also have several different images or different files and bring them into Adobe After Effects, but I prepared it all ahead of time. Got the sizes roughly the right size in Photoshop. I made my Photoshop image the default size for the media screen size we're going to use for this animation. Alright, so I have After Effects open. First thing I'm going to do is make a new project. I'm going to save this. Save as. I'm going to track down my folder. There's my monsters folder. I'm doing the Adobe After Effects project, and I'm going to call this Monsters. Save. As you can see, it saves it as Adobe After Effects project right there in my folder. Let's come back here to After Effects. We have a larger project, and within that project we can have several compositions. Now these are like scenes or vignettes or different effects scenarios that we can have in one project. So each one of those is called, each separate one is called a composition. For this project, we're going to basically make one composition. So first thing I should do is make that composition and make the settings for that. Composition, new, and call this Monsters 1. I'm sticking with the default HD TV 1080 at 30 frames per second. If you don't see that, you can click and select it down here, HD TV 1080, 29.97 or roughly 30 frames per second. The width 1920, height 1080. We should stick with square pixels. Once again, there's a frame rate. I'm going for full resolution. Now, for the duration, we have a choice of hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, or 30 frames, or 29.97 frames per second. Well, I'm sticking with an 8-second duration for this video. I'm changing it from 30 to 8 seconds. The background of my stage or my file, do whatever you want. I'm doing black for that. I'm going to say OK. There's my composition file. I'm going to save this again. Now I want to bring something into this. I can go to File, Import, or I can come right down here in my Project panel and double-click here. Since I already saved that in that folder, it brings me right to this folder. Otherwise, I would have to look for the files over here. Here's my PSD folder. I'm looking for all acceptable files. There's not folder by my PSD file. I'm going to import this as composition, so they'll all be on their own layers, retaining layer sizes. So the guidelines and the images will retain their sizes. And I'm going to open. Once again, composition, retain layer sizes, editable layer styles. Okay. Here's my folder that I just brought in. There's all my files. I could click one at a time and drag it down here into timeline, into my actual composition movie, or animation, or I could click more than one. I'm going to click the top one, hold the shift key down, and click the bottom one, and drag them all right down here into the timeline. And you can see when I bring them in as compositions, retaining the layer styles, layer sizes also, it puts it in for 8 seconds. That's the length of my video. Everything's in there for 8 seconds. Now, it has them in sort of reverse order, some of these layers, so I'll have to move those around. So let's look at the layers panel over here. It's part of the timeline. The top one is my background. Now, I labeled some of these in Photoshop, which I should have labeled them all, but I didn't, so I'll show you how I can label some of these here. I can right-click, rename. I'm going to call this one background. I'm going to click that background layer and drag it all the way to the bottom of these layers. The next layer is Dracula. I'm going to right-click, rename. I'm going to call him Dracula. And I think he's pretty much in the right place. Our next one is the mummy. So I'm going to right click, rename mummy. Next one. That's a foreground. I'm going to rename that foreground. And you don't have to have this many layers in the background. I just put them in there so you can see some of the possibilities. I'm dragging this down above my background. Next is this little log area over here. So we put that a different layer. I think actually I'm not going to use that, so I can always delete that layer. Next layer is another foreground layer. It's a little closer. Maybe I'll use that for now. We'll put it here. And I can say right click and then rename it. Say sticks. That sounds good. I'm going to bring that layer on top of my foreground layer. My next one is my smoke layer or fog. I'm going to put that back here, sort of where I want it to be. I'm going to right click. I'm going to rename that. Since it's on the right, left, I'm going to say left smoke. The next one is going to be on the right. I'm going to flip this one around. There we go. So there's my right fog over here. So I'm clicking on this layer. I'm going to right click, rename, and call this guy right smoke. I'm clicking back to my left smoke. I think I want to flip that one over. So transform, flip horizontally. There we go. Next is my tombstone. Let's see which one that is. And that's a pretty big tombstone, sort of like a gravestone. I think I'm going to bring that one behind that sticks foreground, so it's just sticking out back there. Next, my other tombstone, which is like a cross. It looks like a cross. I put that down here in the corner. I'm going to right click, rename that one cross. Good. I'm going to bring these smoke layers behind all these other layers in front of the foreground and background. Okay. Next, actually this sticks I'm going to bring. I'm going to leave that sticks there. All right. Next is a werewolf. It's already labeled wolf, so I don't need to change that. I can put him down here. I can click off and click another layer up here to move him around. And just select him. Click off. I can bring Dracula down a little bit. Click off, and I'm going to bring the mummy down. Now I can zoom out on this screen, Command minus, and maybe things will move a little faster. Maybe not. Okay, I'm going to save this. So I imported my elements here, dragged them down, reordered them, and renamed them. And I repositioned them if I needed to. We may have to reposition them again, but I put them generally where I want them. Next one we're going to do is put these guys in a three-dimensional space. I can do that by activating this three-dimensional space here where this little cube is, and I can click and drag these right down there to activate that space. It doesn't look any different, but it's now in a three-dimensional space, which means I can do this. I can click on here, right-click. I take them back. I can click on the top. Stretch this timeline out a little bit. Maybe. There we are. Down here in the empty space of the timeline, I can right-click, New Camera. I could also go up here, Layer, New Camera. Same thing. And then I can put a camera in here. We can control the motion of the camera. So this view will be based on an actual camera. We're going to stick with this 36mm, this default size, that's fine. We'll stick with this angle of view, that's fine also. We could always change these if I wanted to. I'm going to stick with the name camera 1, you can always change that. There's some other ones, 35mm, like a 35mm film, 50mm, some larger screen size film, or file size type camera. We're going to stick with the 50mm. And what this will do is simulate a camera. So we could change the aperture, f-stops, and all that stuff if you know anything about that. And I'm going to say OK. So now I have my camera level here, ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do after I save this is animate that camera. I'll get some camera animation in there. Well, actually, before I animate the camera, I want to reposition some of my objects in this three-dimensional space. There's a couple ways we can do that. We can do it from here, which is our active camera view, or we can do it from the front, left, top, back, right, bottom. I'm going to do it from the, I'm going to look at it from the top, just to illustrate. If I zoom out here, what's going on in this space I created. Here's my camera back here, and here's all my layers of imagery. Right now they're sort of stacked. Remember, they're two-dimensional. They're stacked right here, almost like we're looking down at a pile of papers or photos. If I look at it from the left, same type of thing. Here's my camera over here. Here's my stack of layers. Okay, so now I'm going to position these in space. So when I move that camera, it'll be very convincing. First, I can go to my background. Now I can grab this blue arrow. You see the Z pop up, the Z space, and I can push that background way back to get a good sense of depth when we animate the camera. Next, I'm going to go to my foreground. I can click this Z space here and bring that one back quite a ways. Next, my left fog, and next, my right fog. Grabbing that blue arrow and bringing them back in space. My tombstone. And the further away from each other, the more drastic they will seem. Sticks, that foreground sticks. Woof. Oops, my sticks got sent behind my tombstone, so let me bring it back in front of it. Woof. I'm going to bring him, oh, woof, woof, woof. I'm going to click on that arrow, bring him up a little bit. Actually, I'll leave him about right here. Next is my cross. And there's no real right or wrong signs for this. You can put on whatever you think would look good, and you just sort of get used to this. Next, the mummy. He should actually be behind the wolf, so let me bring that wolf up a little bit. And let me bring that tombstone, that cross that's in front of the wolf, up a little bit. Next, Dracula. I'm going to bring him quite a bit closer. He's going to be the main character of my scene here. Okay. Now I can look at this from the active camera, see some of the changes. As you can see, I put the background way in the back now, so I'm probably going to have to resize that. And I want to resize this big enough to go, I want to go off the stage or off the screen. So if I rotate my camera around the screen, there'll be plenty of background space to cover those motions. Now with that, I may need to move my foreground. I definitely need to make that bigger. Even though it's not real visible in this angle, I still need that just in case. Just resizing it. Make sure it's big enough. Ooh. Zoomed out too far. Okay. I think everything else looks pretty good. One thing I should check is here at the bottom, make sure none of my characters are cut off here. I can see where they are. Good. Tombstones, everything else looks pretty good. I think I might want to take this cross tombstone, bring them up here a little bit. Now I can also resize things if I need to resize things. I brought this closer so it feels a little bigger. I might want to make it a little smaller so I can grab the corner and start resizing it. Hold the shift key to maintain proportions. That might fit a little better with my werewolf there now. Move them in a little bit. Good. I think everything else looks pretty good. I'm going to make the mummy a little smaller. Hold the shift key to maintain proportions. Ooh, too small. All right, there, good. It's up to you however you want to resize, move these things around. Next, I'm going to animate my camera. I can click on my camera, drop that down with that triangle, and I also have my transform here. We're going to stop this video, and we'll come back in our next video and animate that camera. So far, we've made our project, made a composition within that project, brought in some prepared Photoshop layers, brought those layers down to the timeline, repositioned them, renamed them if we needed to, put them in three-dimensional space, added a camera. And we then move those different layers in Z space, pushing some back, pulling some forward. So when we move our camera, we do our animations, it'll seem more realistic, like a realistic space. Let me show you one more thing. We can also, we change those from the left view, we can change them from the top view. We can also change the position in Z space from the front view here by moving that blue arrow. I can also move them right and left and up and down, or the y-axis and the x-axis. All right. Last thing, I'm going to save, and then I'll see you in the next video.